What's happening, everybody? If you can, real quick, turn to Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. And I'm always excited about the opportunity to preach. Pastor informed us we're going to do sermonettes. And I'm glad he didn't introduce the three of us as the sermonettes. That'd be a little weird. It's like, give it up for the sermonettes. That is hilarious. So for my brief time, I want to talk to you on the subject, why my daddy didn't. Why my daddy didn't, as we saw Sean emotionally acknowledge his dad and talk about Caleb. You know, as Barry just eloquently walked us through the scriptures of 5 traits of what a dad is, man. Some of us sit in this seat and like, man, my daddy was jacked up. Papa was a rolling stone. In fact, I don't know what kind of stone he was. I didn't even know him. And so my heart goes out to the individuals this Father's Day whose hearts have been, broken, who are piecing their hearts together. I know that, the Bible says that God is a father to the fatherless in Psalms chapter 68 and Psalm 68, Psalms doesn't have chapter, excuse me, Psalm 68 and verse 5. But, today I'm thinking about the individuals who've been hurt by dad. The individuals not who've only been hurt, but the individuals who are being hurt by their father. That's who I'm thinking about today. That's who my heart's heavy about this entire week. I'm thinking about the children, the people who have a tough time with this thing called Father's Day. Man, you raise question, man, why we got to celebrate Father's Day anyway? This term father just brings up, emotions. If you got the blood pressure cuff and somebody mentions father, your pressure instantly goes up. What about these individuals, man? As Barry said, our view of God is distorted and even shaped by our fathers. Some of us and some individuals have a difficult time praying to God the Father because of the bitterness or the hurt that your father has caused you. Like, I'd rather pray to the Son. Because for every time I say, God, my Father is my, some of us, because of the things that our Father has done to us, brings us great difficulty when we say, Father. So we got a text, Acts chapter 17 and verse 22. Acts chapter 17 and verse 22. And I love this passage. This is, it answers a lot of questions that we may have. Acts chapter 17 and verse 26. It says, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to dwell, every man of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation. Having determined their boundaries and their habitation. So here's what it says. Some of your versions might say, God appointed, all mankind from one man, all mankind to dwell on the face of the earth, having predetermined their appointed times and their habitats. So God, before he said, let there be light, determined that you would live and be born in the year that you would be born in. In fact, God predetermined that you would live in the neighborhood, the trap, whatever, the projects, the hood, the suburb, wherever you were born. God predetermined. God determined that you would live in the time and the place and in the household and have the parents that you would. So my question is like, okay, God, if you knew, if you are all-knowing, why in the world would you allow this teenager, this adult to be born in the home in the time that they did with the father who would leave them hanging the way that they did? Help us. Why? If God, that's what the Bible said, God determined the time and the place. God determined that you will live in a house with a daddy that got on your nerve. God determined that you will live in a house with a daddy who came home drunk. God determined that you will live in a house with your dad with his free will would beat your mama. God determined all this stuff. Why in the world would God do that? That's what I want to know. Because I hate to see people hurt. And knowing that some people have a difficult time with Father's Day, it breaks my heart. So here's what we got to understand. God placed you in the house, in the neighborhood that you lived in. You got to know this first, that God is sovereign. I'll say it again. God is sovereign. That has been one of the most life-changing truths that I've ever come to. Even as a young dude in seminary, I had a great difficulty with God's sovereignty simply because I admired those who have, academic and intellectual, prowess. There was a preacher, a pastor, who went to law school. He went to seminary, finished, and then went to law school and finished, all while pastoring. And me and my young self struggling in seminary, I'm like, how did that dude do that? He was married. He had 3 sons, married 3 sons. Him and his 3 sons were on driving. He got to a stop sign. A man behind them had a heart attack, drove into them, killed all 4 of them, the father and the 3 sons instantly, and left that poor woman by herself. My question is, why you do that, God? Why you do that? You could have taken me out. I wasn't even married then. Take me out instead of him. I'm the one struggling in seminary. And I know that God does what he wants to when he wants to. God is sovereign. And at the funeral, now imagine, at the funeral, 4 caskets sitting there. On the interstate, 4 hearses following behind each other. That was tough. And at the funeral, they sung this song that will forever change my life. They said, sovereign, sovereign, sovereign. So, yeah, some of y'all know that gospel song. And then they said, my God can do what he wants to, whenever he wants to. He's God. Sovereign, sovereign, sovereign. And as I heard that song, I was like, that's it. Man, God, I don't know why you did it. However, I trust you enough that you know more than ignorant Jason. So if you want to take a pastor who's a lawyer and has 3 sons and loving his wife, if you want to take them out, me and my ignorant self, I got to trust you enough to be okay with my ignorance. Okay, but that's a dude who's married, But what about us? Understanding that God is sovereign. Man, I wish I had time to read this. I don't. So understanding that God is sovereign, that he does what he wants to. Second thing you got to understand is that your daddy ain't God. Your daddy's not God. Your daddy is not perfect. So stop trying to put your daddy on God level. God is the only perfect one. He's the only one that doesn't make mistakes. So a lot of times we put our dads on the wrong pedestal. Even in my mind, after the junk that he did, he said that he was this. He was supposed to be this. Your daddy ain't God. And then the next verse, he gives the answer right here. Here it is. Man, oh man, we should take another offering for this one. Verse 27 says that they would seek him if perhaps they might grope for him and find him. Hold up, wait a minute, let me put some boom in it. Here it is. God predetermined that we would live in the time and in the homes that we would live in so that we would seek him and grope for him. Grope has the idea that you can't see and you're feeling your way through, focusing, trying to feel your way through something. So God allowed you to be born in a home where your dad made his own decisions, whether great or whether sinful. And God allowed you to be in that house, and your dad and God's sovereignty allowed your dad not to do certain things and do certain things so that when your life begins to progress, you wouldn't look at your life and say, look what my dad made me. You would say, look at what God has done for me. God does this stuff. You know, all of us have our stuff because ain't none of us, be fathered by God, earthly, in an earthly sense. So all of us have these things. If my dad would have pushed me to be a comedian when I told him in high school instead of laughing, maybe I would have been so great of a comedian that I would have become conceited and prideful, which both of us can do, and look at my own self. But because my dad didn't push me and say, you ain't being no comedian, you going to college, then I began, as I started exploring this comedy thing, I just began every single day to cry out to God, God, you want me to do this? I need your help. But if my dad wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't have cried out to God the way that I do. I asked the question, why did God allow us to be in a home? The other question, why did God allow us to be in a world? Well, he would create a world and allow one father to make a mistake, to sin, and allow sin to be brought into the world so that all of us will be jacked up. But if you look at Scripture, God in his sovereignty said, you know what? We, the Godhead, are so good, let's make a world. Let's let them make bad decisions because they ain't God, and we're going to let them tear up. But then we're going to come around, son, you're going to go down, and we're going to fix the whole thing up and show everybody that we are God. Church is over. Happy Father's Day. But listen. Listen. Some of us have been carrying around bitterness because we've been holding our dad to a certain standard. The greatest thing that I've heard this morning on Father's Day is that Brother Stanton, this is a memory when he accepted Jesus. Today is a day. It's Father's Day. Won't you let this be your day? Father's Day has been difficult for you. Won't you switch it and let it be the day that you accept Jesus Christ? Won't you let Father's Day be the day where you dedicate yourself to him? I've been bitter, but on Father's Day, from now on, it's going to be my anniversary when I'm free and I look to God and forget the past of my father. Let's all stand.